Good morning, everyone. Before we call the meeting to order today, we have an administrative matter that we need to attend to. With our chair and vice chair both being absent today, we need to select someone to chair today's meeting. So I'll be looking for a member to move a motion to nominate someone to chair today. Would anyone like to move a motion? Mr. Outhet?
Do something wrong. I'd like to nominate Brian Wong.
Okay. There's a motion to nominate Mr. Wong to chair today's meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, very well. Thank you very much. We'll just have a 2-minute recess while we set up the new chair.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our first, our early fall session of the Public Accounts Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. So I am Brian Wong, and this is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for September 10th. So just reminders before we start to make sure you have your cell phones on silence. Should be any need to leave the building, please exit through these doors to the right to Granville Street and go to the Art Gallery Courtyard. As we get moving, I'd ask committee members to introduce themselves, beginning with Deputy Minister Munro.
Good morning. My name is Joanne Munro. I'm the Deputy of Service Nova Scotia and All New Affairs.
Good morning. Chris Mitchell, the Chief Procurement Officer with Service Nova Scotia.
Good morning. Geoff Gatien, Associate Deputy Minister, Department of Health and Wellness.
Good morning. Dana MacKenzie, Deputy Minister of Health and Wellness.
Good morning. Karen Oldfield, Interim President and CEO, Nova Scotia Health.
Good morning. Derek Spinney, Vice President, Corporate Services, Infrastructure, and Chief Financial Officer at Nova Scotia Health.
Yeah. And if I could have the committee members introduce themselves, starting with the official opposition.
Rod Wilson, MLA for Halifax Armdale.
Paul Wozni, MLA for Sackville-Cobequid. I use he, him pronouns.
Good morning, Derek Mumberket, MLA, Sydney Member 2.
Ian Rankin, Timberley Prospect.
MLA Timmins.
Oh. There we go. My name is Diane Timmins. I'm MLA for Victoria the Lakes. Thank you.
Tim Outhet, MLA, Bedford Basin.
Good morning. My name is Rick Burns. I'm MLA for Hammonds Plains, Lucasville.
Good morning, Kyle McQuarrie, MLA for Inverness, and thank you very much for being here.
And thank you for that. And if we can start with introductory remarks with Deputy Munro, please.
Turn that off. It's on.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about the province's use of alternative procurements. I'm going to start the opening remarks to talk generally about the use of alternative procurement across government, and then my colleagues will speak specifically to its role in the healthcare sector. Alternative procurement is widely recognized here in Nova Scotia and across Canada as a legitimate and necessary tool to procure goods and services. We welcome today's discussion as an opportunity to clarify when and why we use this approach, its important role, and the safeguards we have in place to ensure the process remains fair, transparent, and competitive. Before I continue, I'd like to introduce Chris Mitchell, the province's Chief Procurement Officer. Some of you may already know Chris from previous appearances here at Public Accounts. Together, we will be happy to answer your questions this morning. Chair, let me begin by emphasizing that we welcome the interest in alternative procurement. I want to thank the Auditor General and her office for their collaboration in reviewing our practices. While we are very proud of the work we do, there is always room for improvement. We value the Auditor General's feedback and have accepted all the recommendations provided. Today's meeting is a chance to share the work currently underway in response. Our procurement practices are recognized across the country. In fact, Chris has played an instrumental role in supporting the federal government's procurement ombudsman's team in the recent development of new procurement policy, much of which was informed by the strong protocols we have in place here. For example, the creation of a central chief procurement office, a standardized set of protocols and vendor performance management to ensure quality contracts are managed to obtain negotiated benefits. Chair, alternative procurement allows us to respond quickly and appropriately in urgent, specialized, and exceptional circumstances. These processes are governed by rules agreed to by all provinces, require documentation and authorization, and must align with trade agreements such as the CFTA. While our procurement team works closely with departments pursuing alternative procurement, we are not always involved in the final decision. We provide the advice and expertise that departments need as they buy goods and services that are critical to Nova Scotians. Of the $1.8 billion procurement spend last year by the province, $273 million was related to contracts established through alternate procurement processes. This means that just over 15% of the procurement spend was related to alternate procurement contracts, while 85% was competitively sourced or low-value purchases. Additionally, 720 contracts were awarded through S&S procurement during last fiscal year, creating a savings opportunity of $129 million established through strong negotiations with the selected vendors. We are proud of the work being done and confident in the systems and oversight we have in place. I look forward to answering your questions and continuing this important conversation. I'll pass it now over to my colleague, Deputy MacKenzie.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. We have a single focus, a single priority: to advance healthcare for Nova Scotians. It's a task that comes with its share of challenges, but we've faced each one head-on. We've improved a range of programs and services. We've increased supports so more people can access primary care. Surgery wait times are down. Changes to how we help move patients through emergency departments and hospitals are getting people to where they call home sooner. We continue to put more health information in the hands of Nova Scotians. Getting from where we were to where we are, and now moving to where we want to be, requires us to change how and where people work while ensuring they have the tools, equipment, and technology to support the change. We must use every tool at our disposal to make changes to improve care and services as quickly as is reasonable. This includes strategic investments, partnerships, and alternative procurements. These are all important and valuable tools that have contributed to increased access to health care and improved outcomes for Nova Scotians. The use of alternative procurements has been a valuable and necessary tool to seize opportunities that have presented themselves and has allowed us to support government's commitment to fix health care for Nova Scotians. We have been able to form partnerships and implement solutions to address long-standing challenges and pressures while responding to new and urgent demands as they arise. We have used alternative procurements to secure new technology for patients and providers, to enter contracts to address healthcare backlogs, and to create more care options for patients. Let's focus on healthcare innovation and technology for a moment. The Your Health NS app has been downloaded more than 850,000 times since it launched. What started off as a one-stop shop for health information, services, and resources has, in a short time, grown to include medical and immunization records, medical appointment reminders, and an AI chat tool to make it easier to navigate the information required. Virtual care is another. It's part of our work to improve access to primary health care for Nova Scotians. Your Health, NS, and virtual care, combined with other initiatives, are diverting people away from emergency departments into appropriate care in their community. We have also made significant improvements to address backlogs for surgical care by relying on vendors who have the expertise to deliver and provide health care services for Nova Scotians. A recent Canada Information Health Institute report, or CIHI, shows that Nova Scotia has made meaningful progress to reduce surgical wait times for key procedures, tying for first place in the country for cataract surgeries. Nova Scotia Health has negotiated agreements with Halifax Vision and LASIK MD to complete up to 13,200 cataract surgeries each year. They have also entered partnerships to address diagnostic care wait lists. An agreement with HealthView to conduct MRI and ultrasounds have reduced wait lists last year by 18% and 2%, respectively. Despite these and other successes, we understand there continue to be concerns and criticisms about the use of alternative procurement. We recognize that there are many procurement options, and depending on the situation, use the most appropriate option. However, I want to assure the committee and Nova Scotians that we work closely with procurement specialists at Service Nova Scotia and with our health authorities to determine the most appropriate approach for securing the services, resources, and expertise we need to further government's priority of advancing health care for Nova Scotians. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions today.
And we'll pass the final opening remarks to our CEO, Oldfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to speak about our procurement practices and specifically how and why we use alternative procurement, or ALT-Ps, in addition to traditional public tendering processes. Across Nova Scotia Health, public tendering remains the common way that we acquire goods and services. It's competitive, transparent, and ensures that most purchases are conducted in a way that delivers fairness and value to Nova Scotians. That said, there are times when flexibility is necessary, and that's where alternative procurement comes in. Nova Scotia Health uses this method for about 10 to 12% of our contracts out of an entirety of 3,000 contracts in total. In the right circumstances, alternative procurement methods respond to urgent needs, accessing sole source suppliers, or to extend contracts. They're used to provide continuity, sometimes to save money, or to meet a unique operational requirement. And that flexibility has allowed us to meet critical timelines for healthcare equipment, to respond quickly during emergencies, and to build on existing vendor relationships where switching would introduce unnecessary costs, complications, or service interruptions. Some examples. First, on site, to immediately remediate the Nova Scotia Hospital's fire-damaged laundry building. Software to strengthen our provincial cancer surveillance and cancer control efforts. Let me talk about one specific example, and that relates to Nova Scotia Health's Care Coordination Centre, which we stood up just over 2 years ago. Initially focused on the QE2, but with a sequenced rollout to hospitals across the province. Already, Nova Scotians are benefiting from the integration of technology with the strategy and process changes. C3 is still early in its evolution, but this investment in both people and technology has, in a way, it's already paid for itself with $29 million in annual savings. C3 has resulted in 100 hours saved every single day from QE2, from emergency department to inpatient care, and has had an impact equivalent to adding 32 new beds to the system. So we've seen patients spend 29,000 fewer days in hospital through avoided admissions and swifter transitions home. It's also important for me to explain that when the so-called cost of the alternative procurement is released, that doesn't mean that the full amount is spent right away. These costs are often planned to happen slowly over many years. I don't take any of this spending lightly. It's your money, as Nova Scotians, as taxpayers. Every Nova Scotia health procurement must meet specific criteria, be fully documented, and be subject to oversight. There is accountability at every step. Ultimately, when required, alternative procurement enables Nova Scotia Health to deliver better value, faster service, and stronger results, while maintaining the principles of transparency and fairness that are the foundation of public procurement. Look forward to answering your questions and expanding on how we use these tools to support healthier communities for generations. Thank you.
And thank you for the opening remarks. We are now going to start with our rounds of questioning. We will end at 10:50 promptly. The first round of questioning will be for 20 minutes for each caucus, and we will start with someone from the NDP. MLA Wozni.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Oldfield, in your opening remarks, you suggest alternative procurement is a minor part of health spending. Yet the Auditor General reported that for the Nova Scotia Health Authority, 94% of all goods and services spending is through alternative procurement methods, a figure that has ballooned under your watch. Can you explain why there is such an alarming reliance on alternative procurement for goods and services under your leadership?
CEO Oldfield.
Thank you. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we have 3,000 contracts, of which 10 to 12% of all of those contracts are Alt-P. The dollars are only one part of it. And as I mentioned to you, the cost of when we use an Alt-P, what happens is the complete value of a 5-year, of a 7-year, of a 10-year contract is included all at once. It is not smoothed over the entirety of the contract. And how that works financially, I'm going to ask Mr. Spinney, our CFO, to speak to directly.
CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Karen said, there's some relativity in those numbers. So one of the things to describe, first of all, is that the words in the report that say 94% of our procurement was done through alternate procurement doesn't mean 94% of our spend in the year was through alternate procurement. So let me just explain that for a second. So last year we spent about $3.9 billion at Nova Scotia Health, and in that $3.9 billion, about 30%, or in some rounded numbers, $1 billion would be supplies. So the fact that that would be our total procurement, what we procured in the year. What the Auditor General is picking up on, and some different words maybe could be used, is what new contracts did you sign in that year? So it isn't what you procured or purchased in the year, it's what new contracts you signed in the year. And those new contracts that you signed in the year, what's their total value? So in the case of Think Research, which is a popular one, for instance, it was quoted as $50 million, but that's a 5-year contract. So we didn't procure $50 million worth of supplies. We signed a contract that was worth $50 million. So depending on the cycle that you're at with your contracts expiring, new contracts being taken, you're going to see that number go up, and then you'll also see that number come back down. So not to say none of those numbers are small, they're all in the hundreds of millions, so they're big numbers, but just trying to make it relative and further explained, I guess, on the words procurement versus signing things in year.
I recognize MLA Wozni.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up there, Ron. In her 2024 financial report, the Auditor General cautioned that alternate procurement can lead to risks like increased vendor reliance, reduced transparency, lack of competition, and diminished value for money. I'm wondering if you could outline how you are working to decrease the use of this risky process.
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Sorry, just can you just repeat the last sentence, which was the question?
MLA Wozni.
The Auditor General cautioned that alternative procurement can lead to risks like increased vendor reliance, reduced transparency, lack of competition, and diminished value for money. Please outline how you are working to decrease the use of this risky process.
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
I'll finish.
Or Mr. Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a great question because the Auditor General rightly points out that when you do an alternate procurement, you're increasing risk. And so part of our job is to manage that risk. Doesn't mean you're not going to do it. It just means you need to be cognizant of the risk and you need to manage that risk appropriately. So the question is a very good one. We're doing a few things. First of all, anytime that we do an alternate procurement, there are checks and balances in place to still make sure that those things are being attained, which is best value, transparency. The fact we're here today is transparent. And of course, the Auditor General doing their good work to ask good questions as you're asking good questions. So all of these things help protect that. In addition to that, we also, depending on the procurement, will do different things. So in the case of choosing our service provider for West Bedford Transitional Health Facility, although we used an alternate procurement path, we invited different vendors to put forward proposals. And so 7 different vendors put forward proposals that went through an evaluation competitive process, which we then narrowed down to 2 and then eventually narrowed down to the winning proponent, which would be Shanix. So even though there's alternate procurement, it doesn't mean that there's not a competitive process, and it certainly doesn't mean that we're not looking forward to achieving best value. In fact, sometimes that's why we're doing it, is to achieve the best value. The other thing that we're doing, Chris Mitchell can add if we want to go into it in more details, but one of the challenges that we have is our procurement processes are not always as agile as are required in modern times, if I can say it that way. So the length of time it can do a traditional procurement can be extremely long, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So 2 examples of things that Chris's team has helped to implement and has led us through is creating standing offers, for instance. So in our IT space, we now have an established standing offer for certain skill sets so that we don't have to create an RFP every time, but is a competitive process to get on that list and then bid on any of the work, so that we're not doing an alternate procurement. It is a procurement path, an established one, through a standing offer. The other thing that was just put on the procurement portal this week, I think it was notice to the vendor community that we'll be accepting applications this fall to create a similar approach, a standing offer, if I can call it, for consulting services. So more general consulting services. We have a challenge, we need some help, here's what it looks like, who's interested. We don't know what those things are until they actually happen. So we need to create a pool that has been pre-qualified that we can then go to with business problems that they can then bid on. By introducing that process, we expect that that new process will take about 8 weeks to complete a procurement process instead of today's environment, which will take over a year. So those are a couple of the different strategies that we're trying to make sure that we minimize our use of alternate procurement through new procurement tools like the 2 I just mentioned, as well as when we do use alternate procurement, that we're still pursuing the intent, which is best value.
MLA Wilson.
Thank you for that answer. The recent delivery or awarding of construction service provider West Bedford was provided to one company, a private for-profit company. When I visit that organization, that institution recently, I was to meet a constituent. I was surprised to find that the constituent reported they were been short 2 nurses that day, and subsequently she was waiting hours to use the washroom. So this relates to my question. When you award these sole vendor contracts, what indicators or deliverables are built in and measured regarding quality? Because obviously the quality on that day was not great. So when you're awarding these contracts, what deliverables in it, and how are they ensured that quality comes with the service provider and the sole procurement?
CEO Oldfield.
Thank you. Mr. Spinney just explained that within our West Bedford arrangements, there was actually an RFP process, which eventually led to the award of a contract with a private company. And with regard to the specifics on that contract and deliverables, I'll ask Mr. Spinney to speak to it. I'm personally not aware of that situation, and I thank you for bringing it to my attention. So I will, if you can give me the details after, I'd be happy to look into it.
I recognize MLA Wilson.
My next question besides that is also, in the vetting of these alternative procurement processes, what conflict of interest process is applied, and has there been any conflicts declared, or how many conflicts are often come up?
I recognize Deputy Munro.
Thank you for the question. The conflict of interest, the public service overall has all requirements for declaration of conflict of interest, but we have built into the ALT-P process a conflict of interest attestation. It starts with the submitter from the department, where they attest that there is no or perceived conflict of interest. It also comes into the procurement specialist who does the review of the ALT-P as per the legitimate procedure and oversight of trade agreements and so forth to see whether or not it aligns to the rationale. And then it goes back to the deputy because at the end of the day, the deputy signs off and also declares and attests that there is no perceived conflict of interest. And so it is baked throughout the entire system. I'll certainly let my colleagues speak to numbers. I'm not sure that we track that, but there is a specific and required attestation for all that are involved in the sign-off of alternate procurements as part of the justification and oversight process. Anything to add?
I recognize MLA Wilson.
Question is directed to the CEO, Ms. Oldfield. You mentioned oversight. So a question I'm curious about in the process is, where does the final decision lie in terms of what vendor to award the contract? Is that in your office, or does it require approval of the executive office? And secondly, are there minimum dollar values that or maximum dollar values in any alternative procurement process that would require approval by the Executive Council?
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Thank you. Typically, that would be something that would flow through to Treasury Board and require Treasury Board approval.
MLA Wilson.
What parameters do you operate with in terms of the dollar value of the contract that require approval?
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So the signing authority policy, maybe I'll start there because I think that's part of what you're asking, at Nova Scotia Health is anything over $1 million, the CEO needs to approve. So that's kind of anything over $1 million is the CEO. However, we need to stay within our budget and our funding limits. So in the case of West Bedford, for instance, it was an extraordinary contract, so it went to Treasury Board for approval. So the CEO would make a recommendation based on their signing authority, and then for an amount that large, it would go to Treasury Board for their actual approval to provide the funding for it. So there's kind of two parts there, the recommendation above $1 million, and then depending on the funding levels, it would go to Treasury Board.
MLA Wilson. My apologies, MLA Wasney.
Thank you, Chair. I'll direct this question to Nova Scotia Health Authority. Earlier this year, we heard that that Nova Scotia Health would, quote, work closely with the Nova Scotia Government Procurement and the Office of the Auditor General in the upcoming fiscal year to improve and clarify policy and procedure. I'm wondering if you can explain the improved procedures currently underway flowing from that commitment.
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Thank you for the question, and it's a really good question, and it was something that the Auditor General report has caused us to revisit, because there's been some clarifications in some of the language and approaches that I think we've been able to put in. But I'm going to ask Mr. Mitchell if he wants to answer that, because the procurement policy and the sustainability policy really fall under Chris's team. So I'll let Chris answer it.
I recognize E.D. Mitchell.
Do you want to start? Thanks very much for the question. So directly from the input or observations from the Auditor General, we've done a complete rework of the Public Procurement Act this year, and as well as the Sustainable Procurement Policy, which is now renamed to the Public Procurement Policy. And inside of there, we actually call out the ways which we will follow, challenge, change, and how to deal with alternate procurements. But I think, interestingly, we also deal with the other 85% of the procurement, which is when we go to market, et cetera, because everything that we've so far talked about, from conflict of interest to how do we determine when and what dollar values, is broken down in that same policy. So for example, conflict of interest is a critical issue, whether we're going to go through an open market RFP or whether we do an alternate procurement. So similar to the way that it's been laid out by Deputy Munro earlier, conflict of interest is declared right at the beginning of every one of them. It's declared before anybody participates in those processes. So those are the things which, working with the Auditor General and the Ombudsman, we've pulled out, cleaned up, made sure that the policy reflects the actual practice. And then there's a very tight control over that from the beginning of what do we need from the client department side, right through to how do we take it to market.
MLA Wasney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Executive Director for that answer. For the Department of Health and Wellness, we've heard about some broader policy updates. I'm wondering if you can speak to any new policies or procedures for oversight of the Nova Scotia Health Authority, specifically by the department.
I recognize Deputy MacKenzie.
Thank you for the question. With respect to procurement, the oversight that would be required would normally fall under the normal practices that we have with our legislative and statutory tools, like the requirement to file an accountability framework with the department, to work together with respect to the filing of the annual business plan, and of course, as my colleague Mr. Spinney has mentioned, the annual budget process is one where we, as partners, try to anticipate what those operating needs and capital needs are going to be over the subsequent year. So with respect to how deeply we work together, we don't have any kind of new innovations in that space. In the procurement space, where we rely heavily on the advice and guidance of our colleagues at Service Nova Scotia, my colleague Mr. Mitchell has already talked about the updated legislation and the new Public Procurement Policy Act. And there has been, I know, a lot of work done with respect to bringing more clarity with respect to the health services exception under the Canada Free Trade Agreement, so that we can all kind of have a defined set of terms about when and where that exception applies. So those are some of the new things where we're always collaborating together to make sure that we're always going to be delivering on best value with respect to the contracts that are awarded. My colleague, Ms. Oldfield, I think wants to supplement this.
And with just under 2 minutes left, I recognized MLA Wasney.
Ms. Oldfield wanted to speak. Health wanted to.
My apologies, CEO Oldfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just wanted to add two things to that. In addition, we have the health leadership team, which most of this would be flowing through as well for yet another set of eyes. And just to reiterate what the deputy has said, it would be very unusual that there wouldn't be a good substantive discussion around the best way to move forward.
And with 1 minute, 10 seconds left, MLA Wilson.
Big question, so if we don't get to complete it, hope we can complete it in the next round. With the current contracts that have been awarded through alternative procurement, when they expire, is there a process in place for a discussion as to whether they're renewed? Do they go to public tendering, or is it individual for each procurement? Or what's the process to be applied to the current alternative procurements when those contracts expire?
CEO Oldfield.
Thank you. Let me use a specific example. One of the contracts deals with Maple. And, you know, Maple was, luckily we were able to secure the services of Maple at the beginning of COVID to create Virtual Care NS, which has morphed into part of Your Health NS, but a very important component of providing access to Nova Scotians. And that contract has an expiry date. We've already made the determination that that will go to RFP, and I would expect to see that.
My apologies, the 20 minutes has expired. Perhaps we can continue this on the next round, and I recognize MLA Mombriquette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to all the committee members. Thanks for being here. I'll start us off with my first question. It was referenced that the department spends about $3.9 billion in various aspects of running the department. I guess my first question through Mr. Chair to either Mr. Spinney or Ms. Oldfield is how much of that $3.9 billion is untendered?
I recognize CFO Spinney.
So part of what I'm trying to maybe circle back to as well is in the report, I forget the page number it's on, but there's a graph that shows the total number of procurement, and the bars are quite small, and then it starts to spike in the last 2 years, and that's where the 94% comes from, is in the last year. So those are contracts that are being signed for that year and future years, but the procurement, at least my use of the word procurement, is like, what are we spending in year, to your point, I think, as well. So in that $3.9 billion, I don't have the exact number. I'm trying to back it down into what a number would be, because even in so we can follow up on that as well for you, but even in the numbers that are used here, for instance, in the last bar, the 94% bar, there was $291 million in alternate procurements, of which a large portion of that would have been with Varian, with the large value partnership, for instance, and it would have been for a 10-year contract. So if you even just take that number and divide by 10, you'll get 29 million, and so the spend in the year for that would be a much, obviously, smaller number dividing by 10. You would then take previous years where there were alternate procurement and how much was spent within the year. So it's a bit of a it's not a large number, I guess, is what I would say. And I think it was mentioned earlier, 10 to 12% of our contract signing is through alternate procurement. So that's another way to look at it, I suppose.
I recognize MLA Momberkat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that. And if the committee could get access to that information and update, that would be great. I think it's important for the committee to see it, to have the numbers. The other thing that was mentioned too, as well, is there's a pool of consultants that are used that if a situation arises, that they have this pool of consultants. My first question is how much is spent on those consultants based on the information that has been provided by the Department of Health to date?
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Yes, may I just ask for clarification as to what period of time, please?
MLA Momberkat.
2021.
CEO Oldfield.
Just to be clear, so commencing Jan 1, 21 to date, and I'm guaranteed we're going to have to take that number out, but we can and be happy to supply it.
MLA Momberkat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that. I can appreciate that the committee may not have that number, but I think it's important, and I'm asking the question because it was brought up at committee this morning that there is a pool of consultants that are used in doing some of the work when it comes to the Department of Health. So if the committee can provide that pool of consultants that are used and the information regarding how much has been spent on that pool of consultants since 2021, you can start January 2021, I would appreciate it. And because I think it's important if we're using a lot of external organizations to help solve some of the problems of government. It's been done in the past as well, but it will be interesting to see how much has actually been spent. My next question, it goes back to the untendered contract piece and how really the government makes the decision, or the departments are making the decision around how to determine who to use for alternative procurement. And I do reference, there is the reference around the health app, which hundreds of thousands of Nova Scotians have downloaded, and as has been indicated by the committee, has really been an evolution really since pre-COVID to get to the point where there is an app that Nova Scotians can use. Of course, we want Nova Scotians to have as much information about their health as possible. But my question, Mr. Chair, through you, is around Think Research was one of the companies that was used in regards to the app. How did the department come to use Think Research?
CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Think Research had approached us, Nova Scotia Health, and perhaps the department too, not to speak for them, and put forward a proposal that really provided two things, one package, but two particular types of utility. One was to provide Nova Scotians through the app, because they didn't actually build the app, but they provided functionality within the app to be able to provide Nova Scotians chatbot functionality so that you could go in and say, I've got a cold, where should I go, those kinds of things. And so it was a if-then-else sequence to determine and help point you in the right direction. The second part of that is through that algorithm, it may determine that you're a good candidate for virtual care. You don't need to go into an emergency department. You can go through virtual care. So they provided Nova Scotia the ability to connect directly into emergency room physicians at UHN, so the University Health Network in Ontario, so that we could do virtual care visits. So it increased our bench, if you will, and lots of qualities and checks on that as well. There's a director of patient safety, for instance, there that we work with to make sure that only the right people are on the line, et cetera, et cetera. Happy to share all those reports too. So And that package of things is really what was most appealing, obviously, is the utility. So although we talk about Think Research, they're a vendor, it's really a solution that we're providing to Nova Scotians that are delivered through different partners. But the most significant partner at the end of that equation are the UHN physicians.
I recognize MLA Mombrikat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My next question, again, around the app. How much has been spent to date on the app as it's been developed? I know Think Research had a contract for $50 million. How much of that $50 million has been spent to date?
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Yeah. So a couple questions in there. So maybe we'll follow up too to make sure that we answer it appropriately, because a few things is that what do we consider the app? So there's the app. There's also our natural language AI tool in there now with Google. There's also the ability to see your health records. So there's different components of it. So I guess I just want to make sure I get the right number back. And then Think Research as well, because they provide the virtual care aspect. Like, is that, do you consider that part of the app or not, for instance? So you can access it through the app, but you can also access it through 811. You can also access it through the rural Nova Scotia hospitals, the emergency departments, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that we add up the right parts for you.
MLA Mombrikat.
Yeah, thank you for that. And back in estimates, we asked this question again, and it was referenced that Think Research is one part of the app, a small part. So I guess my question becomes, is this $50 million contract, in my opinion, is not a small part of an app. So I'm just curious, and if Mr. Spinney could provide the information in the future, I'd appreciate it around that, because a $50 million contract, when the department is actually saying it's part of the app, it's significant. Has my next question around procurement, has the province made any property transactions under alternative procurement at all since Hogan Court?
Executive Director Mitchell or Deputy Munro? Recognize Deputy Munro.
Thank you for the question. Real estate transactions are completed through Public Works, and so that's a separate process. And further detail from Chris? Nothing? Okay.
MLA Mombrikat.
Thank you. Okay. So I guess we'll have to ask Public Works that question, but I can. At this point right now, I was going to ask the question around, have any of the long-term care facilities that are under construction, has land been purchased under alternative procurement, but the department can't answer that question, correct? Okay.
Deputy Munro, I guess looking for a response.
Oh, the answer is no. We have to ask Public Works, yeah.
I recognize MLA Mombrikat.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess my next question will be around, Mr. Chair. Has the Procurement Division of Service Nova Scotia made sure alternative procurement forms are only supported in appropriate circumstances?
Deputy Munro.
Thank you for the question. I'll start, and then I'll have my colleague jump in. But all Ps, I'll reiterate, is a legitimate and regulated procurement approach used by all provinces and is allowable under the CFTA. And so we are governed by rules and that oversight. And so we have lots of different processes in for review, review of the CFTA rationale and reasoning, and there's dialogue between the departments and ourselves and our specialists. There's legal review, and so there is a robust process in reviewing to ensure all Ps align to the CFTA, and The CPO is involved as well in those discussions, and so I'll let Chris talk to a little bit more of the detail, but the rigor in the process is aligned to the legitimate process under the CFTA that all provinces use.
I recognize Executive Director Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think what I would add to that is at the working level, the department, in this case, Department of Health or Nova Scotia Health, submit the form. There's a procurement specialist assigned to it. There's quite a bit of back and forth to ensure that the reasoning and rationale that's provided meets or doesn't meet the trade agreement requirements for that particular circumstance of an alternate procurement. The difference that's come into play in about the last year since we've been working with the Auditor General is that level or the level above it at an operations manager perspective can approve or support, rather, that submission for an alternate procurement. The difference we've inserted now is if it's to be not supported, that needs to go through the director and it comes to my office specifically. Before I do not support those, there's a requirement, and it's in the policy now, for me to have a one-on-one with the senior administrative officer of whatever that department is. So in this case, it might be Derek, who's had it devolved down to him, et cetera. So the answer is now an unsupported from a department or Nova Scotia Health has a chief procurement officer level review put on that before it's returned to them.
I recognize MLA Marmarket.
Thank you for the answer. My next question is around alternative procurement and what we're seeing in the world today. There's been a big push for Canada, and you know, obviously we're all living the current administration of the United States. You know, there have been reports at times where, you know, it's been debatable and arguable that, you know, companies that have been doing work in Nova Scotia from south of the border, work could have been done by either local or Canadian firms. Under the alternative procurement strategy, are you starting? Is the department looking at supporting more Canadian companies, and can the department also provide to the committee a list of alternative procurement contracts that have been used by both Canadian and U.S. companies in the last 3 years?
I recognize Deputy Munro.
Thank you very much for the question. So rest assured, we are all focused on providing business to Nova Scotian firms first and Canadian, and every situation and every case for a requirement to purchase is reviewed with that light. And there is a real commitment to look for alternate vendors that are not US based. So first off, there's a commitment and it's about Team Canada. So that's number one. I would also say that since March, we've inserted into every RFP, not just alt-Ps, but every RFP, this wording: in accordance with Nova Scotia government's public procurement policy, the province reserves the right to exclude bids from jurisdictions where trade barriers, example tariffs, have been imposed or where exclusions are justified by national security or similar exceptions. So we take that very seriously, and we can stop a procurement at any time if a vendor comes from a country that you know, falls into that. So we have control. And I would also say that from a Service Nova Scotia perspective, we in fact stopped an RFP that was soon to be awarded and went right back to square one to look for a Canadian alternative, and that process is underway. So it is hitting the ground running, and we do the work that needs to be done to ensure we divert our dollars to Canada and to Nova Scotia. But I would like my colleague to add on if there's anything that you feel is worthwhile.
Recognize A.D. Mitchell.
Hi, thank you very much. Not much to add other than the fact that I think everybody appreciates it's incredibly complex to try and either exclude folks, include only Canadian, et cetera. So what the government has done is it's given us clear direction. Select Canadian when you can, and so we've put the wording that Deputy Munro has just indicated in every template for every RFP that goes to the street. We're working at the federal, provincial, territorial working group level to try and make sure we're in step with Canada and the other provinces. And so we have the ability, we have the political will and direction in order to drive it into Canadian, and where we can, Nova Scotia. So absolutely doing lots of work there.
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to maybe share some specifics as to where this can be applied, and we actually don't have to look much further than the Nova Scotia Health Innovation Hub, where, you know, one of the raison d'etres is to promote local, Atlantic, Canadian medical technology and other services in a test and try environment. That's the purpose of the hub, really. And so that's important. And we work very closely with a company called Can Health. And Can Health is a company, as a national company, which does a lot of that due diligence for med tech. I'll just use that term, med tech. And once approved and on the Can Health roster, enables us to more quickly procure Canadian health tech solutions. So these are really important things because for two reasons. Of course, as you've mentioned, Team Canada and the challenges, but also if we can find ways to improve patient care while at the same time creating economic benefits right here in Nova Scotia or Atlantic Canada or Canada, then that's exactly what we should be doing. And, you know, I'll just point to the fact that one of the contracts under discussion today relates to Varian, and one of the whole purposes of the contract and the value add is that they are opening an office, I think it's early October, right here in Halifax, where they have 50 employees. So it's a contract that does more than one thing, and I think that's a really important part of the value that we look at when we are determining whether or not to use alternative procurement as a tool.
I recognize MLA Momberkat.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and appreciate the answer. I only have 49 seconds, so we probably won't get much of a Q&A back and forth, but it's important for us that, you know, alternative procurement, you know, the oversight is key. And to my last question around the economy, it would be interesting to see how much over the years the government has actually used or relied on contracts that, you know, hopefully now can potentially be covered by Canadian companies. And I know that governments of all stripes are really trying to battle this right now. And as we continue to talk about this, which will continue to be a question that will be asked around alternative procurement when governments spend money outside of tenders, that we're putting that lens on Canadian companies and making sure that we can support as many homegrown companies as possible. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I'll now have the Progressive Conservative Caucus start with their 20 minutes, starting with MLA Timmins.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the response and the questions on behalf of my colleagues here on the committee. Sometimes it's not easy to know the impact of the new initiatives.
Just order. My apologies if I could have Ledge TV start the timer. Thank you. MLA Timmins.
Thank you for the restart. Sometimes it's not easy to know that the impact of the new initiatives and will have when it is contract stage and the implementing stage or even year or two into it. So as an example of an initiative which has had a chance to mature and make its mark, I want to ask about the Care Coordination Center. What has been its impact, and what does the story tell us about the importance of the innovation and the boldness as we fix healthcare?
CEO Oldfield.
Thank you. I think many of the MLAs have actually seen C3 in operation. If you have not, it's an open invitation. The Nerve Center is located on the 5th floor of the building in which my office is housed, and it gives me an opportunity literally to check in every day. What's great about it is that we can see across the province. We have the ability now to see beds across the province, where there might be beds, where there is a real need to find beds, if I could put it that way. It allows us to see EHS arrivals, transfers, all of this information. It is a massive amount of data about our entire system, the operation of our system. So there are tiles. The term is called a tile, but it's kind of like a mini app within the command center, which is a number of boards across a wall. Looks like NASA Command, if I can give you a visual. And the tiles include capacity, so our bed capacity. It has a patient manager, so who's coming, who's going, when are they supposed to leave, what's holding up their discharge, as an example. There's an emergency department expediter, so we can see that. There's surgical flow, and there's also intake. So all of these things taken together are pulling data from the various systems across the province and gives us a provincial view. And what I love about it is the fact that, you know, not only can we see it, but then we have experts across the province. Well, they've become experts across the province, and they're able to come together, which they do weekly, to say, okay, what are our top 3 problems? How do we solve those problems? And they're doing it in real time, together, looking across the system. So what has that given us? You know, so what? Well, the so what is, you know, and every time I do this, I have a different number, but today, the impact is 29,000 hospital days saved, which is the equivalent of adding 32 new beds to the system. If we translate it into money, it's $29 million. And so I think this is a critical improvement, because it's not that we're putting savings in the piggy bank. It means that we're able to then bring the next person who needs care, bring the next person who needs care. It enables our coming in, coming through, and being discharged to happen in a much more efficient manner, which is what we've all been struggling with for many, many, many years. What I'm particularly proud of is that we are the only province in the entire country that has a command center, which is a provincial model. So it can't be underestimated. And again, I invite you all to come and look and share, you know, you see what I see, which helps us to manage the system in a much better fashion.
I recognize MLA Timmins.
Thank you, Ms. Alford. I certainly wasn't aware of the system. I heard of it, and thank you so much. And I would be very happy to visit and take a look at the system and learn more about it if it's possible. Thank you. How does Nova Scotia alternative procurement methods compare with other jurisdictions across Canada? Are they methods that we can learn from other provinces, and have you implemented some in the past, or are you looking forward to in the future as well?
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Sure, and I actually just going to roll to Mr. Mitchell, because he's actually the person who has to look across the country to determine that. Thank you.
Executive Director Mitchell.
Thanks very much for the question. So alternate procurements come from the free trade agreement. All of the provinces are signatories, and the federal government as well, signatories to that agreement. It doesn't lay it out like a baseball score sheet, top to bottom, here's the following 23 circumstances that you're allowed to do an alternate procurement. What it does is it gives documentation of where provinces have agreed there is no real benefit to going to the market. So there's any number of them. You've heard them all before: sole source, compatibility, et cetera. Each province interprets those with their trade partners, so for us, our IGA partners, to frame those up into a set of understandable, hopefully as much in English as we can. Trade agreements are written not by the general, person next door. They're legal documents, and so they have to be interpreted initially. then they have to be determined what that particular government wants to follow as a circumstance to not go to an open competition. And to be fair, every government and every procurement organization understands that the best way to guarantee getting the best value, the best time, the best terms and conditions in a contract is to go to an open competition, no doubt. But there are times when going to a competition doesn't make sense, right? Nova Scotia has taken all of that input from that trade agreement and generated it down to 23 specific alternate procurement circumstances. There's very real guides to indicating when those are appropriate and when they're not. And the actual response to can we go that way, should we go that way, is on a very much file-by-file basis to determine is that the best way to do it or is it not.
I recognize MLA Timmins.
Thank you very much. And going back to the Care Coordination Center, as you said, we're the leader in Nova Scotia providing that. That might be something that the rest of the provinces across Canada might be interested in hearing the history of it.
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Well, two specific points on that. You know, we are contacted regularly from other provinces, and we contact other provinces to share best practices. We want to learn, they want to learn. C3, it is amazing. We've had a request from one of the other provinces to come and tour it. They're looking at it themselves. They want to know the ups and downs. And we've also had the opportunity, I've had the opportunity personally to meet with and share with the other CEOs around Atlantic Canada, including 2 in New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland and Labrador, to see some of the things that we're doing. And you know, I think that's really important, but we also learn too. So for example, the Atlantic CEOs met last week in Charlottetown, where we had the opportunity to learn as well. And we're looking for ways to cooperate where we can, particularly in Atlantic Canada, where it makes sense. If it makes sense, why would we not do that? If we can procure together and have a stronger buying power, why would we not do that? That only makes sense. And so, you know, yes, as other provinces learn what we're doing, or we learn what they're doing, there are opportunities to raise our game.
I recognize MLA Timmins.
Thank you for answering my questions. I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues to give them a chance to ask some questions.
I recognize MLA Macquarie.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of you for your clear and concise answers. Your expertise, well-defined roles, and tight integration are obvious in your answers. Most impressive is your openness to evaluation and your dedication to continuous improvement. So thank you very much. So the first question is, for anyone, what due diligence is done before choosing an alternative procurement? And then how is performance monitoring done to ensure an agreement continues to deliver best value?
I recognize Executive Director Mitchell.
Thanks very much for the question. I'll just quickly start from a general perspective and then pass it along. Alternate procurements, sometimes you just fall into them. So if you have a blue truck that only has blue parts available and there's only one place that sells blue parts, you have to go there. There's no point in asking the red parts dealer for any kind of a, you know, an opportunity, right? So alternate procurements are generally done, the client department, in this case, Department of Health or Nova Scotia Health, has a requirement. They make an assessment that there's only a particular or one specific supplier that can solve that requirement, and they begin the process. From there, it's just purely a review, determine whether the trade agreement holds out the right rationale for going that one way in an alternate procurement, and we go down the route from there. And the contracts are negotiated the exact same way that they are, whether it's an RFP or whether it's an Alt-P. It simply misses that point about going to the market and finding multiple vendors. So the process outside of that works very much the same. It's based on what they're looking for and if there's only one vendor that they feel can actually do that work for them.
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Another great question, and it really, as Chris said, depends on the circumstance in which they're coming in. So there are some instances where it's quite clear there's only one vendor that actually does this, and so that's why you're using an alternate procurement. It wouldn't make sense to engage the market on that. At other times, there are unique proposals brought forward. But in each of those, again, it's important to go back to best value. Like, that's 2 words that you can remember when you leave here today, is that's the intent of all procurement, is best value. And so the definition of best value can become a challenge because it's not just money. If it was only that easy, you know, my previous life in the private sector, it was actually much easier, if I can say that on the record, in that return on investment was much clearer. When you're dealing in the public sector and you're dealing with real people and real lives that you can't assign a dollar value to, you can't only look at the dollar value. You need to understand what's the impact to the human and what's the impact of doing nothing, and put that entire equation together and then make a decision on what's the most appropriate path to take. So that's one of the reasons why Chris's role is a little bit different than my role and Karen's role, in that Chris gives advice on the Procurement Act as to what it actually says. What Karen and I have to do is we have to fulfill our duty of care to Nova Scotians, and that is much more than what you would find in a Procurement Act. So it really depends on the circumstance, and all of those things get taken into account, and we come back to best value, but then you need to debate best value. Like, what is that? And it's good questions. We should not shy away from the question. I really appreciate the work that the Auditor General is doing in this area. They can tell you firsthand, we've had some spirited debates on this, because they are good questions. They're important questions. They should be asked. We should be transparent. Everything should be posted, and we should be able to defend what made you conclude that that was best value.
I recognize MLA Macquarie.
I'd like to pass it on to another member here, Rick Burns.
I recognize MLA Burns.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming in this morning. I've enjoyed listening to your answers. They're very clearly thought out. It's becoming clear that we have a well laid out, well planned system for procurement. So I wanted to ask a slightly different variation on that question. What are the risks posed to the healthcare system if we did not use alternative procurement methods? So could this result in delays in projects or increased costs?
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Short answer, yes, of course. But to elaborate, so I'm maybe just picking up on where CFO Spinney left off there. We have to look at a large equation, and you do look at time. Of course, you look at cost. You look at the ability to get through a process in a time that is going to help Nova Scotians, impact Nova Scotians and their care. And sometimes it needs to be faster than other times. So time and urgency is a really big piece of how we look at value and how we evaluate risk. So you can verify this with Mr. Mitchell. I did discuss it briefly with him this morning, full disclosure, but you can ask him to get it on the record. But I asked him, what is the average time today for an RFP? And for a simple, if there's such a thing, RFP, that would be 6 to 8 months. For a more complex RFP, that would be 12 to 18 months. Mr. Mitchell, and you can ask him how many people on his team, how many requests does he get in a year across government, of which Nova Scotia Health would just be one of many. So just because I say it's urgent doesn't mean it's more urgent than any other person. So all of that has to be looked at. And I'm going to say straight up, 18 months can be too long. Not always, but it can be too long. And so then we look for a different way to do it that is going to enable us to deliver care to Nova Scotians in the manner in which they deserve. And so I think some of these factors never get talked about when we're talking about alternative procurement. Like, we almost use alternative procurement like there's something wrong with it. It's a tool. We have many guidelines, a lot of oversight. We're not just going and doing something willy-nilly. There are reasons for doing it. I think that's really important, and I'm emphatic on it because value is more than just money when you're talking about the life and health care of Nova Scotians.
MLA Burns.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Mr. Mitchell, if you wouldn't mind, I'll give you the opportunity to share your thoughts on, the impact of if we didn't use alternative procurement and strictly follow the traditional procurement method, and what risks you see associated with that.
I recognize Executive Director Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So as CEO Oldfield has mentioned, like alternate procurements, if we're not doing that and we take everything conventionally to the market, the numbers that she referenced are probably pretty close, right? So they're 5, 6, 7 months for, and when I say a simple RFP, that means there's no negotiations, there's no best and final offer process, et cetera, which means if you throw that in, you throw in trials, et cetera, some of the things which Nova Scotia Health would need solutions for could take 24 plus months. So alternate procurements are a tool, completely above board tool that's laid out for in the trade agreements, used only judiciously when they're the best solution. And if you think about it, and I've often, if I've been here before and I've said, if you think about a triangle and on the corners of those triangle are good, fast, and cheap, and you can only have two, in an instance where the good is a given, right? In healthcare, we want to make sure what we buy is the good, the right, the best solution from a technical perspective. If you have to now pick between fast and cheap, each one of those requirements needs that sort of a analysis to determine if I have to have that tomorrow, then I need to use the process that will be able to deliver that the quickest. And in those instances, you may pay a bit of a price premium. But as I mentioned earlier, there's still, every single one of those contracts is still heavily negotiated at the back end, whether it's with the contractor that we pick or firm that we pick in that particular LP, or whether they're the resultant of an RFP, the negotiation piece on the back still, as much as possible, guarantees government the best pricing and structure. But that good, fast, cheap is a real thing in procurement in reality. So that's, alternate procurements are there for a particular reason. It would be very challenging for us to do the work we do now if every single one of those procurements had to go through a full open competitive process.
And with 40 seconds remaining, I recognize CEO Oldfield.
One of the other things we haven't talked about is the cost of training. If one were to switch suppliers or switch machines or something, that has to get tacked on to time as well. So in many cases, there could be, it could be weeks or months to properly train clinicians and others on a change. And I'm just going to drop the 10-year procurement window that it took for Oracle Cerner on our upcoming OPOR implementation.
And thank you. We are going to start our second round of questioning, starting with the NDP Caucus. And who would like to start? I recognize we have 11 minutes for each caucus, and I recognize MLA Wilson.
Thank you for your comments. It's been helpful. I'm curious, though, Mr. Mitchell and Ms. Oldfield, if you feel, it sounds like from the tone of your comments that the procurement progress 18, 20 months is too long. So why not solve that problem instead of doing a workaround? I mean, why not? Are you resigned to the fact that it can't get better, or why not emphasize on improving that process?
I recognize Executive Director Mitchell.
Thanks very much. It's an absolutely smashing good question, because we do this annually we go and do scans with our compatriots across either the federal level, provincial level, international levels to try and determine, and we have the procurement. So I would say procurement, I call it an acquisition phase, right? So before it ever comes to my team, the team that needs something needs to spend an appropriate amount of time determining all of the terms, all of the specifics of what they need, et cetera. The quicker they can do that, the better they can do that. Perfect. But as you can imagine in the health world, clinicians would rather jump off a cliff than get involved in procurement. They want the result, and that's not a bad thing, but they want to practice medicine, right? They want to be doing the thing. They don't want to be involved in meetings to try and determine how to go to market, et cetera. So we try as best we can to break the acquisition end to end into bite-sized pieces. So determining specifics at the front end to writing RFPs and ensuring that they get properly and appropriately put together for the vendor community to understand what we want, evaluating as quickly as we can. But remember, the people who don't get picked always have an argument as to why the thing didn't run as effectively as they would have liked it to. So we have to make sure we're defensible in our selection and our evaluation criteria. We need to then go through every single one of those. We have to negotiate with the highest vendor, get through those. Sometimes we get all the way down and we can't come to an agreement with the highest vendor. We now need to go to the second vendor. So each one of those, we systematically, so to your point, and it's an absolutely great question, we systematically pull those apart, trying to shrink down as many days out of, if it's 25 days to do that, can we get 4 days out? So we don't get 18 months quickly by taking big 4-month chunks out. We try and take days out of each one of those individual processes to take 18 months down to 15 or 12 or whatever that looks like. So constant, try and learn from what we do. Constant, can we accept no pilot or no trials in this one? Each time and each individual file is unique. But yeah, we're always looking at trying to improve the speed of that process.
I recognize MLA Wilson.
As a physician, I would challenge you on that. I think healthcare providers do want to be involved in procurement, at least up front. And the example is, last thing we want is be given a publicly funded electronic medical record that doesn't meet our need, and that's happened. So I think that healthcare providers of all, need to be involved, in some point. But I agree, not with the paperwork. Probably the bigger question I have is data security is top of mind. We've seen the concern expressed by Nova Scotians with the recent breach at Nova Scotia Power. So to me, it's a serious concern. When you're awarding contracts such as Think Research to Health Nova Scotia, how critical are you, and what is being done to reassure Nova Scotians that their sole procurement, private contractor, vendor, our data, Nova Scotians' data, is safe, and it's also tested during the safety procedures. The data security is being tested during the life of that contract.
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a good question. And I think the most important thing to remember is that when we're using alternate procurement, we're still negotiating contracts, just as if we had gone through the RFP process. So the negotiating of the contract, in many respects, is no different. And so part of that would be all of those concerns and more that I'm sure you could raise as well as a physician yourself. So all of those concerns are still dealt with through the negotiated contracts, including cyber, infection prevention and control, quality, et cetera, et cetera. So in the case of our Maple in case of the Maple contract, there's quality reports that we get. In the case of the Think Research contract with the UHN physicians, there is a director at UHN assigned that oversees that physician bench to ensure that that quality is there. So we don't give up, I'll say, any of that by virtue of going through an alternate procurement process. The contract, the considerations are the same.
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Thank you. And just to add to that, there are, particularly the more complicated a contract is, there are different teams of experts that would weigh in. So for example, legal, definitely. Financial, definitely. Privacy, yes. Cyber, yes. So it's not one person doing all of these things. Literally, it is a team of experts bringing their specific expertise to bear to make sure that, you know, everything is looked at properly and meets the standard of care or the standard that we would expect.
I recognize MLA Wilson.
So is it built into any contract, alternative procurement, there are definite timeline and deliverables in terms of that Nova Scotians can be assured that the vendors, example, for Nova Scotia Health, that the data is being constantly tested on a regular basis and you're provided with evidence that you can reassure Nova Scotians our data is safe?
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The short answer is yes. The longer answer is it depends on what we're actually talking about. Many things that wouldn't be applicable. Our considerations with Oracle, for instance, and the Cerner solution is different than what we expect from Think Research, which is different than what we expect from Maple, and et cetera. But in those contracts are the requirements for cybersecurity, as well as just the handling of personal information. So our vendors are required to adhere to the Personal Information Act, and that is part of what's outlined. The way that they do that would depend on the instance, because, you know, repeating myself now, the Oracle solution is different than some of the other solutions.
MLA Wilson?
What I'm looking for, and maybe it's getting into the weeds, is that it's built into the contract, but I'm looking for some concrete reassurance that that is actually being done timely, accurately, diligent reporting, measuring of the cybersecurity by someone.
Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I may just have to take that one away to try to get you some particular examples because, again, it depends on the solution. So in the case of the records that we provide to Nova Scotians through the app, that gets tested with our CSDS team and the firewalls. Like, they would have a whole protocol that they go through, and I can't speak to that quickly today, sorry.
MLA Wilson?
Thank you. Again, we've learned from Nova Scotia Power the wrong way that firewalls are easily breached. My next question is, the Auditor General has cautioned that we might be heading towards increased vendor compliance in some scenarios. The Auditor General also, I'm going back to full circle, has cautioned that there's some risk involved with alternative procurement. Going forward, if you accept those principles as being valid, going forward, what should we expect to see in procurement? Will we be heading, steering towards more public tenders or alternative procurements here to stay and expand?
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Thank you. So we go back to where we were in Maple. So on that specific contract, you know, I just take you back to the beginning of COVID, the middle of COVID, where, you know, most provinces were looking for ways to increase access quickly. We had healthcare workers who were, you know, heavily burdened, really burnt out, et cetera. So we were, I think, fortunate to procure the services of Maple, and now this is however many years. It's time. The contract will conclude. We will go to an RFP with plenty of time to transition if that's what the outcome is. And I think that most of the contracts that we have put through a test and try and a great evaluation process, we'll really have to look at to determine, do we continue, do we pivot, do we continue at all? And so the answer is going to be E, all of the above, because yes, RFP, yes, alternate procurement, and yes, continuous improvement on our process and our procurement processes. One of the most important things that we have to think about as Nova Scotians and as Canadians is we have to look at the pace of change. So yes, I had an anniversary last week. I've been here for 4 years, since September 1. AI wasn't in the lexicon. 4 years is not long. AI is the future, particularly in healthcare, as it underpins so many of the things that we will do. So if procurement rules don't change with technology, with people, with process, then we are not going forward. We are building a system for yesterday, not for tomorrow. So we have to continue to improve and tighten and find new ways. I would be shocked if AI doesn't find its way into procurement in one way, shape, or form. So I think my message would be we have to be prepared for the pace of change.
And my apologies, CEO Oldfield, for the second time today. The next 11 minutes will go to the Liberal caucus, and starting with the MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. It's an interesting discussion, and it's good that the AG's recommendations have been accepted. I do see value sometimes when alternate procurement it needs to be used. Certainly all governments have. But what you were actually just talking about interests me, and the AI aspect, specifically as it comes to the Google contract that was awarded last year. So $42 million to Google to provide AI tools for Nova Scotia Health System, clinician search, etc. So my understanding is this proposal came from an unsolicited proposal directly from Google. So I want to start by asking why this wasn't openly tendered in such an increasingly competitive space. And maybe I'll start there and just ask how this was determined to be the best valued proposal, especially given that it was an unsolicited proposal.
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Karen said, the AI, if I can call it that, the AI didn't exist 4 years ago, or at least not as predominantly as it does now, of course. And so when we first started with the app, we used a chatbot that was provisioned by Think Research, which again, I equated to kind of that if then else statement. Hey, I have, pick from a selection of things. The world, of course, evolved from that to start to get into natural language. And Google was the leader in that space, and in healthcare specifically as well. So in that unsolicited proposal, they were put forward as being the first to market with that capability. And so our team and our CIO led the diligence on that process to make sure that, first of all, is this of use to Nova Scotians, first and foremost? Is this the utility that we need, that we can benefit from? And if we pass that test, then is this the right vendor to use? So that was the process that they went through. And really two main things in there that we're seeing now is the natural language tool that's in the app today. So it was mentioned earlier that it's been downloaded 800,000 times. 300,000 of those are on your phones, which is kind of cool if you think about it. A third of Nova Scotians actually have the app on their phone. But if you go in there and you use the Nova app, and were to type in cancer ethos, for instance, which is one of the pieces of equipment that Varian has provided through this value partnership, it will then come back and give you answers. And so the next thing that will be coming in the spring is the provider aspect of that natural language. So we've given Nova Scotians the ability, now we're about to give the providers the ability to search through the health records using the same functionality. So that's the utility of what's being delivered.
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Let me just be a tiny bit more specific than that, from the perspective that, so many people, myself included, will go to search, a condition if they're worried about a headache or a sore throat or what have you, and sometimes Mayo Clinic comes up first, sometimes Cleveland Clinic comes up first, sometimes, these global health organizations come up. There's been a lot of research, really good research, productive research conducted by Nova Scotia providers, Nova Scotia physicians, Nova Scotia nurse practitioners, etc. What the Google AI it does, actually, it starts with Nova Scotia. It starts with our own research, and which, you know, in Nova Scotia, on Nova Scotia demographics across our province, our mix of people, our conditions, starting with, you know, here, not a town in another country that may or may not reflect the Nova Scotia health reality. So it's a very powerful tool in that it produces information based on as a start what we have here in Nova Scotia. So it's kind of a Nova Scotia first, if I could put it that way, but not only.
I recognize MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not challenging the benefits of Google, and maybe they could have come up on top on a procurement, or I'm just trying to figure out was there an assessment looking at other platforms. And I say that because British Columbia went in heavy with Microsoft, and part of that was they were very strong that they were the best competitor of what they were looking for. There was other provinces that did procurement, Alberta, PEI. So was there ever an evaluation to look at the bundle of services that Google was looking at? Maybe that could be tabled. I think that'd be benefiting the public to understand why this money. And I'm more concerned about the renewal process when it gets extended. You mentioned Maple. How much are we going to be locked in to Google? Because you mentioned Google's a leader. I hear Microsoft is a leader, and I hear other companies are leader in this health space in terms of maybe not the AI citizen typing in, asking questions, but I think it's important. And if I could also, with the limit of time, ask, was this their opening bid? Maybe you have information about, you said negotiation is still required at ultimate procurement. So what was their opening bid, and how did 42 million? I know there's a few questions in there, but there's limited time. So I want to understand how this was negotiated. And can you table the evaluation juxtaposed with what other provinces are getting from a very competitive space of health AI?
I recognize CEO Oldfield.
Yeah, let me start. So I would agree with all of that. I mean, the space, it's moving so quickly, and the leader today may not be the leader tomorrow. I mean, this is going back to my point, the pace of change, it's very, very fast. And I think it's key to, at least the way we're approaching it, what would not be good is to lock in for, you know, a lengthy period of time and then end up at the back of the bus. That wouldn't be smart. So if you are locking in for a length of time, it needs to be with a company that will continue to pace and be, you know, it doesn't have to be the number one, but certainly you want to be in the top. These are companies that have to do the research and the development. We don't have the capacity to do that research and development. That's not our core business. Our core business is to deliver healthcare to Nova Scotians. So there's many factors, and your point is bang on, because, you know, I would say I probably get 5 outreaches a day, minimum, from companies across the world, minimum. We sell this, we sell this, we do this, we do this. And which ones do you send along to the CIO, and which ones do you press delete? And there's many of us who would be in the same boat. And so the landscape is really changing. So I totally take your point, and you might just speak to the back end of Mr. Rankin's question.
CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, we can come back and table the evaluation. I think that's a really good question. And one of the benefits of the ecosystem that has been created over the last few years in Nova Scotia Health is that the world players are actually here now. So the Microsofts are here, the Siemens are here, the Google is here. And so we're able to interact with these people on a regular basis at the hub and elsewhere to ensure that we're making good steps go forward. As far as the negotiating details, first of all, I don't have that. I wasn't involved directly myself, and second, I'm not sure that we could table that, but we'll see if we can actually table that. And another good question in there was around the longevity. You know, what does this tie us into over the long term? A lot of this cost is for the development of tools. It's not required ongoing. So you'll see so it gets built and then deployed. So you'll see the cost from that go down. And it's a short burst here with Google to develop and put those out. There's ongoing costs of working in the cloud, of course, but they're very different than the development costs.
I recognize MLA Rankin.
So when there is an unsolicited bid that comes to a government official that was just referenced, or the Premier himself, like what is the safeguard in terms of the process, in terms of how that's evaluated? And that's why I'd like to see the evaluation. Again, it's not a criticism of what Google's offering. It is that, you know, taxpayers want to know, you know, these other large companies that other provinces are seeing as being the winner, and other provinces actually going through the process of tendering, notwithstanding the, you know, benefits of streamlining, going faster. What safeguards are there in place so that so Nova Scotians know it's not a backdoor deal? And I'm not saying that it is, but in terms of process, like what are the safeguards?
CFO Spinney with 1 minute, 3 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, I'll go back to the two words of best value. Like that's the threshold that that the process is trying to ensure that we get over, or the benchmark. And so it really depends, again, on the contract. So each one is going to be different because it's a different thing that's actually being talked about. So we'll get you the details on the Google one. In the case of some of the other ones, because it is still a negotiating process, just because it's unsolicited proposal doesn't mean that it's going to take place. And just because it's alternate procurement doesn't mean that there's not a competitive tension that gets created through inviting different bids in the process. So it's an important question, one that we should always be ready to answer for the reasons that you mentioned. So.
MLA Rankin?
Well, I thought I might have one more question, but I'll just say thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll now go for the remaining 11 minutes to the PC Caucus, starting with MLA Oudit.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, folks, for being here this morning. It's very helpful, very interesting. I've had the pleasure now on a couple of occasions to visit the West Bedford Transitional Care Facility. It's been open now for a little over 6 months, and I'm just wondering what difference has been made so far, and have these results that have happened, has it sort of exemplified the need for more of these facilities? So how's it doing, and is it looking like a really good thing that we should continue to do?
CEO Oldfield.
West Bedford's doing extremely well. It's actually doing precisely what it was envisaged to do. Let me explain. And, you know, in preparation for today's session, I actually had the opportunity to meet yesterday with the service provider. And we'll start by saying there is an open invitation to every member here of this committee for a visit, and that extends to members of the media as well. They are very proud of the work that they are doing, and he has advised of many testimonials of people who have had the opportunity to go through the facility and go home, which is one of the goals. One of the other goals is to enable Nova Scotia Health to identify cohorts that have their best chance of going home with the kind of transitional care that is provided at West Bedford. And so right now it's full, it's at capacity, and there's a waiting list. The new section, which will have another 110 beds, is scheduled to open in early spring. And we had the opportunity to work out a lot of the bumps before West Bedford even opened, and we did that at another facility called Shatford. So I actually go back more than 6 months. I go back to kind of where we started, testing and trying and working out the models and so forth at Shatford. And you know, was told yesterday that if we go back to the test and try at Shatford, we're actually talking about 20,000 conserved bed days. So this is in just about a year. 20,000 conserved bed days. So we kind of think about that in the context of C3. And I hope that what you can see is these different models are freeing up space in acute care, which when we compare it to West Bedford it's a different cost structure too. So If folks are able to get out of the acute care hospital into transitional care and go home, then that's a win. That's what it was envisaged to do. That's what it's doing. And the other piece that I find really, really helpful, and this is what I don't, going back to one of the earlier questions, I just don't get this, but I will get it. There are wearables, which any patient coming into West Bedford, it's like a watch, it's like a Fitbit type of thing, which staff wear and patients in West Bedford, and that wearable has 68,000 data points. So it dings when a person takes a step or not. So that's the part I don't get. So I'm going to find out the answer to that question. And all of that data is used to further improve care, to look for ways to help that person get through transitional care and home even faster. So that's where I'd start. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
CFO Spinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to throw some numbers to help quantify some of that too. So far at West Bedford, with the 68 beds that are now happily filled, we've had 199 discharges. People go home or leave the facility. Of the 199, only 6 have gone to long-term care. So another interesting stat is, of the 267 people that have been admitted there were 16 people that were approved and pending to go to long-term care that did not end up going to long-term care. They ended up going home. So those are 2 really significant stats about how this is working. Now, when I was there a couple of months ago walking through, and I do strongly encourage everybody to go, because it's by no means perfect, but one of the themes I'll say is take an idea and make it better. So Google isn't perfect, Maple isn't perfect, none of those things. I shouldn't even call them vendor names. All these solutions, virtual care, the app, none of this is perfect. We start, we make it better. So I encourage the questions and we make it better together. So go visit it and help us make it better, because it will be. And it's continued to evolve. Even what we thought was going to be there has continued to evolve. It is, in fact, the way of the future. That was part of the question. Do we envision more of this? I certainly do. I expect that the way that we construct, the way that we engage the private sector, and the way that we deliver care, this has shown a fantastic way to do it better. Funny story for me being there, just to change your mindset too, maybe of a hospital in air quotes. When you walk in the door there's a bell cart. So it makes you feel like at a hotel. So it makes you feel as if you're going to a 5-star hotel. Now, truth be known, I don't think they use it very often, but it sets the mind stage, right? Or the mindset as you're walking through. I walked through the rehabilitation area, or the gymnasium aspect, and leave you with the mental image. It was busy. There was a lot of pieces of equipment being used, and AC/DC Thunderstruck was blasting through the speakers. So I'm not sure if everybody will get that reference, but it's very upbeat. So this is not a place where you're just going to wait for long-term care. This is an upbeat facility that can do better. Everybody can do better, but it certainly is the way that we can do this better together go forward.
CEO Oldfield.
I think that's a really good point, AC/DC. Okay, my mom or my dad would not know AC/DC. However, what's interesting to me is the average age of patient at West Bedford, and I think we would be surprised. It's in the low 60s. The low 60s. These are people who, with transitional care, can potentially go home, but in some cases go back to work to continue to be productive members of Nova Scotia society and contributing to our tax base. Like, it's really important. I'm excited about it. And, I think that the care it's excellent. And I encourage you, as Derek has done, to go and see.
I recognize MLA Outhit.
this early 60s still knows AC/DC as well. So, and use it every once in a while to psych me up. I really love hearing about partnerships and innovation, and I can really sense your excitement and enthusiasm as well, and that's great. Nova Scotia was first the place in Canada to use the ethos therapy in a clinical setting. Do you have some early results of that you can share with us as well, just staying on that theme of innovation?
I recognize CFO Spinney.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. So the first jump in the pool with that made national news because the first patient in Canada to use this equipment was a Nova Scotian. So that was delivered here with ethos with Hypersight. And so what that combination of equipment and software does is it images you when you show up for your procedure. So it doesn't rely on an old image. It images you as you're going in for the procedure, because all of your organs shift, which I didn't know. I'm not clinical at all. But the picture then is much more precise than it otherwise would have been because it takes the picture at the moment, if you will. It also then has the ability, the precision, to be able to apply the radiation more specifically. So there's less damage done around. The net outcome for a patient is that it reduces your number of treatments from 20 to 5. So not only does that obviously have better health outcomes, but even social economic better outcomes, because now you're not traveling to the city, for instance, for 20 days, getting a treatment each day. You're coming for a much shorter period of time. So that's what ethos is. That's what it does. Another interesting benefit that we've found that is part of the domino effect is we now have a couple units and a different piece of equipment, not ethos, became unavailable. And so it was impacting other cancer treatments. So ethos could be repositioned to do other types of cancer as well. It did that. And what that actually enabled, that domino effect by turning those ethos units on a bit differently to do other things, was it was actually able to take the percentage of breast cancer patients receiving their care was in the recommended time was 64% in the first 3 months of this year. The next 3 months, so April, May, June, that increased to 74%. So we increased the percentage of time that folks are getting breast cancer treatments by 10 points. And again, that's not directly related. Wasn't provisioned on the ethos unit, but it's a direct impact of having this modern technology, leading edge technology, that our clinicians can then take and go back to my theme and make it better, is to figure out what else can we use this for. It enables them different procedures that then has downstream impacts. So those are a few of the things that we've been able to do.
Time has elapsed for questions and answers, and I would ask if any of our guests have any closing remarks before you leave for the day. Then I would ask that we take a 2-minute recess as our guests exit, and we will convene our business afterwards. If I could call order, please, so we could reconvene our committee business. Could I have the doors shut, please? Thank you, everyone. We have several items of correspondence that we just need to go through and see if there's any discussion on it. The first off is the correspondence from the Office of the Auditor General, response to committee request from the June 4th meeting. And do we have any discussion on that matter? Okay. That is passed. Our next one is the Office of the Auditor General 2024-25 Performance Report, 2025-26 Business Plan, 2024-25 Financial Statements. Any discussion? Thank you. Department of Public Works, information requested from the June 18th meeting. Any discussion on that? Thank you. Build Nova Scotia, information requested from the June 11th meeting. Any discussion? MLA Wozni.
Yeah, we've been waiting a long time to see the Halifax Infirmary contract, and Nova Scotians want answers on this project. With only one company bidding on the contract in the end, it was fair to question whether a process shrouded in secrecy delivered the value for money that Nova Scotians deserved. We've been previously assured by this government that, by government members, that the P3 setup was the best approach for this project. And just to note that we'll be looking at this contract carefully to determine if this is in fact the case.
Okay, it was just for information, or did you want to make a motion? Okay, thank you. Nova Scotia Power, a follow-up from our June 4th meeting. Any discussion? Thank you. And the last one is a request for replacement witness for CEO Oldfield in requesting that Derek Spinney, Vice President of Corporate Services, and CFO Scott McKenna, Chief Information Officer, attend the meeting regarding the AG report on cybersecurity instead of herself, as they are best to answer detailed questions on the topic. Any discussion? MLA Wozni.
Yeah, it's common practice for the highest ranking individual from an organization to come to this committee with the understanding that they can bring anyone from their staff who has more technical expertise on the issue at hand. And so we see no reason why the interim CEO of the Nova Scotia Health Authority should be excused from a meeting about a topic as important as cybersecurity and healthcare. Clearly in the rearview mirror, Nova Scotians just went through a massive data breach with Nova Scotia Power. They deserve to know that the interim CEO of Nova Scotia Health is up to date on everything Nova Scotia Health is doing to protect their data. The Health Authority manages highly sensitive information as an expanding digital services through the health app and the One Patient, One Record system. And we believe this is an issue that Nova Scotians expect the CEO be available to address rather than send underlings.
Thank you. Any other comments? Would you like to put a motion on the floor? MLA Wozni.
Sorry, after conferring with my colleagues, we'd like to move that the chair request that the CEO of Nova Scotia Health Authority attend the meeting where that topic comes to review.
So there is a motion on the floor to require that the CEO of Nova Scotia Health attend the meeting on cybersecurity. MLA Timmins.
I'm not sure if I'm doing the right process or not, but I prefer to defer that motion as our chair and our vice chair is not present at the time, and I would prefer to do that while they are present.
So do we have a motion to the motion? MLA Wozni.
Point of order. To whom are we referring this motion?
So my understanding is that we would have to vote as a committee whether or not to require CEO Oldfield to attend or not attend. Okay, so we do have to vote on the motion to defer, which is not debatable. So all those in favor of deferring the motion for CEO Oldfield to attend the meeting on cybersecurity, please say aye. And those not supporting, nay. And the motion has been granted. Thank you. And I believe that concludes our business for the day. Well, my apologies, MLA Wasney.
4 members voted in favor, 4 members voted against. That's a tie. A tie defeats the motion.
My apologies, I only saw 3. My apologies, so I have the deciding vote, and I vote to support the motion to defer. And that concludes everything for the day. I'd like to thank staff and all our MLAs. And MLA Macquarie, my apologies.
Sorry, do we have a date to defer to? Do we put up? Yeah.
And my apologies, we did have one more, well, we did decide to wait for the decision on that. We did have the annual report. Members were provided with the 2025. So, my apologies, time has elapsed. So our next meeting date is September 17th, 2025, Department of Growth and Development, ADSIM for Women and Children. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.